भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति न पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्योरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु। ओम शांति शांति शांति। Upanishads are concerned with complete freedom of every one of us. Complete inner freedom, for which the traditional word is moksha, mukti, and the Advaita Vedanta proposes Jivan Mukti. Not freedom or liberation after death, but freedom or liberation while being alive, while being in this body. This Jivan Mukti is very remarkably and unbelievably pointed out to be Svatasiddha, Nitya Siddha. It is not really to be brought about. This freedom is not to be created, really speaking. You are free and you are to recognize it. That's something very unbelievable. I am already free. Anyone would say, I cannot believe it. So, what is Swayam Siddha, self-existent, is to be uncovered. However, since you and I are so rooted in our personality, you and I are or have been taking a whole lot of things happening as real, and it is rather inconceivable for us to accept this liberation as already present. We tend to think of it as a change that takes place. And what is more, we are so wedded to the concept of time that we regard it as a gradual change. The pure, rigorous position of the Advaita Vedanta does not accept anything that happens in time. Because time itself is regarded as part of the illusion. Time and the jiva, the individual soul, are on par in this mind-boggling philosophy or darshana. Time and the individual are on par. What does it mean to say they are on par? Time doesn't have a higher degree of reality. The individual or individuality is an illusion. You are not really individual unless you take a different meaning of the word individual. Some places they say individual, if you take the word, implies something undivided. Then you are an individual. As you know, in English, in many times stands for the opposite. Capable, incapable. Sensitive, insensitive. Likewise, in the word individual, suppose is taken to denote negation, and the rest of it seemingly having a relation with dividing, individual can mean something that is not divided, that cannot be divided, what is otherwise called indivisible. If you take the word individual as indivisible, the Vedanta would say, yes, that's what you are. You are indivisible. But ordinarily, individual means the separate self, as we have been talking about. So, before I get down to a bunch of 3 very important, at the same time very beautiful mantras of Mundakopanishad this evening, which actually talk about the awakening, which actually talk about not a movement in time from point T1 to point T2, but a movement out of time, from the domain of time, from the realm of time, from the frame of reference where time is real, to that which defies time, that which does not regard time as real. It is a movement, that's a limitation of language, we have to call it a movement, though there is no movement, because movement requires space, movement requires time. In that sense, it's not a movement. And yet, we have to use the word movement. It's a movement from time to the timeless. So I want to make a couple of remarks that the rigorous position is something that defies all our ideas of change, improvement, progress, self-development, transformation, metamorphosis. Big and small words come to our mind, for we are soaked in it. In our usual life, all along we are talking about how to go from here to there. How is the big question that our intellect comes out with. In millions of matters, if somebody is an intellectual, he begins with the question, tell me how. Tell me how, tell me why, etc. are the questions. And I must say that this insight questions the how, questions the why. What is meant is, if you ask why, the Vedanta teacher would perhaps ask you, why do you raise that why? If you say how, the Vedanta teacher would say, how does that how come suddenly? From where does that come? Because, without prolonging on that, this how why, etc. are based on the coordinates of space and time. In fact, Vivekananda used to say, this phenomenal world in which we perceive ourselves is anchored in space, time and causation. Space, time and causation. Where did the chicken come? From the egg. Where did the egg come? From the chicken. So, on the axis of time and on the axis of space, or the three axes X, Y, Z of space, we have plenty of deliberations, and in that sense I said we are generally soaked in space, time and causation. But here comes a mind-blowing insight that this awakening actually is to defy this space, time and causation. In the Mundaka Upanishad, which has 3 chapters or mundakas, the third mundaka, which again has 2 khandas, 2 sections, begins with a very popular and attractive metaphor. And because of its attractive nature, the metaphor has led to a lot of work in the field of literature too. Poets have written poems, playwrights have written plays, story writers have written stories, and in very many frames of reference, people have employed this metaphor of 2 birds on the same tree. I thought this evening, without going into Shankara and all those certain advanced interpretations and explanations, let's take a look at the 3 mantras themselves. These 3 mantras of the Upanishad, Mundaka, from Atharva Veda, by themselves provide so much of food for thought to you and me. Some of you surely know these mantras also, and I suppose most of you know this metaphor. 2 birds on the same tree. Dva suparna sayuja sakhaya samana vriksham parishasvajate tayoranya pippalam swadvatti anashnannanyo abhichakashiti samane vrikshe purusho nimagno anishaya shochati muhyamanaha jushtam yada pashyati anyamisham asya mahimanamiti vita shokaha yada pasyaha pashyate rukma varnam kartaramisham purusham brahma yonim tada vidwan punya pape vidhuya niranjanaha paramam samyamupaiti. These 3 mantras are celebrated and they provide ample material not only for Advaita Vedanta, really they are very inspiring to the Dvaitic or the Vishishtadvaitic and other interpretations of the Upanishads. As all know, Upanishads are the Vedanta, they are the foundation, they are the basis for Sri Madhvacharya, Sri Ramanujacharya, Sri Shankaracharya and so many others, Vallabhacharya, Nimbarkacharya and so many others. Or without the help of any of them, if you were to read these mantras with some Sanskrit knowledge, your heart also will start dancing in joy. Oh, it's beautiful. Therefore I said a while ago that this has inspired writers to come out with poetry and play and so on. In fact, when I was in high school also, in the popular Kannada magazine Sudha, I think, a series of a series was coming. It was, I think, some story, like a novel, Dharavahi as we call it. My first exposure to this Dvasuparna was not through Upanishads. Sudha Mayura we would read in our younger days. And there was one serial of somebody's fiction, Dvasuparna, two birds. Much later I came to know that this is from a Vedic portion, it's from the Upanishad. For two birds, Dvasuparna, without going into much grammar, just for one mention, let me say, today's Sanskrit would say Dvau Suparnau, two birds. They are on Samana Vriksham, on the same tree. And then, even if you just see the literal meaning, one of them is happy, unhappy, disturbed, and at peace for a moment, again uncertain, going through many moods, going through a lot of ups and downs. While describing this in his commentary, Adi Shankara adds one more metaphor. It's like a dried sorekai, what do you call? Gourd. A dried gourd fruit, hollow inside, and it is left on the waves of an ocean. As the waves go up and down, this dried gourd, the Sanskrit word in the Bhashya is alabu. Don't name any child alabu, it's not a very complimentary name. It may have a flavor of its own, but doesn't mean very good here. Alabu. Like a dried gourd floating, going up and down with the waves, the Jivatma, you and I, go up and down. Somebody because of financial upturns and downturns, somebody else because of changes in relationships, someone else having yet another problem. Even scholars being worried about maybe their books not being well received, or enjoying a wave of success, popularity. As long as we are attached to this me, I, me and my, we are like the first bird. And then the pointer is given here to the possibility of the second bird. The second bird, abhichakashiti, anashnan anyaha abhichakashiti. Abhichakashiti is a less known verb, kriyapada, but I guess it has a relation to the better known kash, prakashate, shines. Chakashiti, there is kash, a less known formation of the verbal root kash. Abhichakashiti means shines, radiant. When we are going up and down, here and there, once in a while, of course, our face is bright. But more often than not, there is anxiety. There is insecurity showing upon our face. In contrast, the second bird here, Abhichakashiti, is radiant. Face of Buddha, face of Jesus, face of Ramana, face of all the great acharyas was so radiant. Kings and people placed very well in the society envied them, and people followed them. People's lives were so much touched, not by miracles like walking on water or flying in the sky. All of them give some temporary excitement. Essentially, we don't want to fly in sky or walk on water. Everybody among us essentially wants to be at peace, wants to love and receive love. To love and be loved is perhaps one of the deepest and most fundamental aspirations in human life. Through material success or success in this or that field, actually you and I are seeking to come to a point where we feel so good about ourselves and therefore we are able to love everyone without expecting anything from them. And through that success we also hope that when I am very successful, everybody will love me, respect me. Many a time it doesn't happen like that. When we have more money, sometimes new enemies come up. It is an established theory that from less money, when you have more money, the curve, as more money you have, there is more happiness up to some point. And then even more money, some more money, the curve plateaus. The curve gets flat. And if certain things go wrong, the curve can come down also. But certainly, after some point, those who have made money experience it. They find that money doesn't add to the happiness. The curve plateaus. But before, yes, up to some point, greater the money, greater is the happiness. But it doesn't continue to be so. So is this case with scholarship, so is the case with power, so is case with a million things. We want absolute happiness. None of these gives to us absolute happiness. Here the second bird represents in this way, therefore we call it a metaphor. The second bird represents what we are seeking from the bottom of our heart. Dva suparna sayuja sakhaya samana vriksham parishasva jate. Parishasva jate literally means hug, embrace, hold tightly. The tree here represents our own body. And in this body, for those who are unable to see, who are the vast, overwhelming majority, the Jivatma holds on to the body. And for those blessed souls who are a minute, minuscule minority, the Paramatma shines in this same body. Where the Jivatma is, there itself there is Paramatma. Where the snake is seen, there itself, not a foot further or a foot this side. Exactly where you see the snake, the misapprehended snake, don't bring a real snake here, the misapprehension, what we call adhyasa. I was trying to remember that other popular or much used word in the Vedanta literature, anyatha grahana. There are 3 words in the Sanskrit commentaries. Grahana is grasping rightly. Agrahana is you don't see anything at all. Then there is one anyatha grahana. So in English sometimes they call it apprehension, non-apprehension, agrahana. You don't see anything at all, which is fine. But anyatha grahana is misapprehension. There is actually a rope, but you see a snake and you get afraid. In the case of the rope and snake, the misapprehension causes fear in you. In the case of a mother of pearl, that is a seashell appearing as silver, you get attracted. Your face lights up, looks like I am in for a good financial gain. There is some silver over there. This represents the twofold movement of desire and fear, pleasure and pain. The prospect of pleasure makes us very hopeful. The prospect of pain causes fear in us. All this, please note, is a light thrown upon the psychology in which we are caught. Human psychology is constantly guided, forced or prompted by one of these two, desire or fear. So rope and snake and seashell and silver are the two broad categories. Rope appearing as snake stands for fear rising in our mind. A seashell, which is not worth anything, appearing as the shining silver, one more misapprehension, stands for a large category of cases where psychologically we are excited. Factually we should not be. Factually, if we are to see the fact, there is nothing to be excited. But psychologically, a very strange interaction of outside and inside. When you and I get excited, there is an inside, there's a stimulus from outside, and then there is a response from inside. Therefore, I call it an outer and inner interaction. You see a car, stimulus comes from there, but unless you had certain beliefs, you had certain value system in you, which, let us say, says to have such a car is really great. And not to have such a car is indeed unfortunate. This is your value system. Not everybody who sees an excellent car gets attracted to it. For a lot of people, it doesn't mean anything at all. In the same way, a lot of situations which cause fear to A or B do not mean anything at all to C or D. Therefore, with the same stimulus, you don't say the same response should come. So this was to say that there is psychology involved. In fact, recently I came upon a definition of spirituality given by an author. I liked it. The author says, spirituality, adhyatma, is essentially ending of psychological suffering. It goes very well with the Vedanta stand as I have understood. Spirituality is not about you not suffering when somebody pricks a pin into your body. Some yogis may achieve that. Someone pokes a pin, a pointed thing into your skin, and you don't feel anything. We don't fancy those things. Spirituality is ending of psychological suffering. This pin coming onto your skin is physical, is objective in a sense, and factual. Whereas three of us go to a party and the other two are received with respect, and one of us is given food and drink. We also get a plate of food or a glass of tea or coffee or soft drink. We also get a seat to sit in. Whatever is common to all is given to us, but we are not given special attention. Nobody asks us any question. Then some of us can feel very miserable. Some of us can feel so bad, a lot of negative reaction can come in us. We may feel like walking away, not to mention some other violent responses, violent reactions. That is psychology. Nobody has denied to this person who feels insulted what is biologically needed. Please see, this is very important in the understanding of all spirituality. In the life of you and me, day after day, there is biology at work, there is psychology at work. Hunger and thirst are biology. But desire for a big house, or name and fame, or desire for even one individual, desire for one individual talking to us lovingly, respectfully, and if that doesn't come to us, we have a heartburn. One individual in some get-together, he is talking to her or him or them with great joy, and I go near him or her, this one individual. Though I go and stand in front of her, she either doesn't say anything to me, or she just says, Hagidira, and she turns that side. And if I feel very depressed, look at her. She talked to everybody with so much of excitement, love. I have done so much for her. I have done this. Psychology starts. And she did not give any special attention. Just as Hagidira. That anybody can ask. So our mind reacts. Please see, the distinction of psychology and biology is very critical. I personally have been walking this journey, and as I have said before, the who am I inquiry of Ramana Maharshi has been very, very fascinating to me. And I have found that to conduct or to go about who am I inquiry with a proper maturity requires a fine sense of discriminating between biology and psychology. Unless we recognize the psychological forces at work within us, we won't be able to conduct who am I inquiry. To say just a couple of words more on it, in my own journey for that matter, initially I thought it is all about tackling our thoughts. No matter what thought rises, ask yourself, who has this thought? That's what the Ramana literature generally says. Ask yourself, who has this thought? Of course, your mind will say, I have this thought. Then don't stop there. Ask yourself, who am I? And then that thought subsides. If I get a desire to watch a movie and I am trying to ask myself, who am I? Who wants to go to a movie? Who has this desire? The mind says, I have. Who am I? There is no proper answer. But I gaze at it. I try to hold on to that question. Then the mind becomes quiet. Otherwise, shall I go today or tomorrow? Or shall I keep this watching the movie for the weekend? And this time shall I buy the expensive ticket or the middle ticket? Shall I go to that very fancied theater, or there is a near our home a simpler, smaller one? In whose these are called details of desire or anger. We are talking about psychology. In human psychology or the psychological movement, think of a reference thought, and there are thoughts which in essence go further outward. They are the details. Maharshi Ramana made this very clear. Do not go further outward into the details and then go in circles. That you have been doing anyhow all the time, both in pleasurable and fearful circumstances. When you are threatened by something also, the mind tends to think of all the details. Instead of going into details, unless it's very much warranted, Maharshi Ramana never says, always quieten your mind. All spirituality has to be taken up with common sense. Suppose you are sitting at home and suddenly you find some smoke is coming from somewhere, and then you realize that something has caught fire and it's dangerous. Don't say, I must ask, who has this thought? Because that is not psychology. It is actually there is danger. So you better find out where the fire is breaking out, put it out, and get busy with your spirituality a little later. So, where you have a sense that once more I am going into a big, either daydreaming or fancying some fear and so on. So ask yourself, who has this thought? To me, quiet. I was doing this, but after some time I realized that again and again we hit the, blank wall. A lot of my students also started telling me, this who am I you explain, Whatever thought comes up, question who has this thought and then question who am I, then we just reach a wall. So initially I said, stay with that wall, something will happen. It was neither happening to them nor to me. Boredom. Or you kind of feel that, I could have answered 2 or 3 emails in the same time. So I don't want to make much fun of it. Probably it's a yogic practice. It would not be Jnana Yoga. Jnana Yoga is a yoga of understanding, of insights. Whereas Raja Yoga, by and large, with due respect to Raja Yoga, which I suppose in advanced stages will have understanding, will have Jnana, will have Vidya. Whereas Jnana Yoga, from the beginning, is marked by understanding. You need to what is desire? You need to understand. Understanding is different from being able to write a 1,000-word article on it. That is scholarship. Somebody may write a huge book on, egoism. I believe there was somebody who wrote a big book on A to Z of egoism. And that book sold well. And he was more egoistic than ever before. And he went around saying, have you read my book? Have you read my book on egoism? And if somebody said, I read that one book, are you the author? Of course, I am the author. And so on. So, there could be somebody else who could not write even 100 words on egoism. And that person could be free of ego. Therefore, we bring in a word, insight, with due respect to scholarship. We don't mean to undermine scholarship, but scholarship is not the primary means for rising above egoism. Then what is the primary means? It is seeing that this position that I take, now I am better than everybody else, or some other time, all have gone ahead, I am lagging behind. Either way, both are forms of ego. To see that this self-description which puts me down or puts me up there, such a self-description essentially is a play of the mind, it's an illusion, it is not to be taken as real. This insight, it is more about seeing the false as false. It is not about verbosity. It's not about writing or speaking or coming out with a poem on ahankriti, ahankara and so on. That kind of verbose or verbal abilities has a place in the whole game, whole scheme. But freedom comes by insight. And now to conclude this digression, even who am I inquiry, as though takes high speed, it goes on fast track if you begin to see the sense of I for what it is. The sense of I, once more, which will be high or low, typically stands on certain beliefs. You enter a place, meet a few people, and then somebody says, he is a senior clerk at some office, and you know that you are the chairman of a company. Factually and functionally there are, of course, ups and downs. High and low are there. But basic value, basic self-worth of a human being has nothing to do with being chairman or being a senior clerk. So, if because of some conditionings, because of some influences, because of certain inputs that were given to you, and as the expression goes, you bought in, maybe in childhood, maybe in young adult days, or maybe just yesterday, a new influence. We all of us have to varying extents certain influences. We get emotional, sometimes. When Atal Bihari Vajpayee became external affairs minister, I guess in Morarji Desai's or some government. I mean, I don't say he became egoistic, but he became emotional when he sat on the chair of Minister of External Affairs. And if I remember right, he said, I am excited that I am sitting on the chair where at one time Pandit Nehru sat. Probably along with being Prime Minister, he had taken these two, external affairs. Some years ago, I had a chance to sit next to the Vice Chancellor of Banaras Hindu University. And to a certain extent, a tiny wave of excitement came upon me. Professor Singh was there, and I was sitting next. I delivered a lecture, Malaviya Memorial Lecture, in the Banaras Hindu University. Why did I get a bit excited? Somebody else would not be, perhaps. Because I have great regard for Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan. And I know that Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan was Vice Chancellor of Banaras Hindu University. And today I am sitting on the same dais next to the present Vice Chancellor of Banaras Hindu University. So all association, And I felt slightly emotional before delivering my lecture. So various ways, this mind of ours, this psychology, has number of beliefs, associations, images, etc. And in the Who Am I inquiry, even as there is a sense of gloom, sense of depression, sense of sadness, sense of loneliness, whatever comes to us, rather than simply, if I may use the word with brute force, make it go down. If you make it go down with brute force, then after some time it will again rise, because you have not eliminated the root cause. Whereas, don't work on thoughts with brute force. Work on your thoughts with gentle understanding. And as though you are looking at your thought, your excitement at times, or your sadness, both are actually based on certain questionable beliefs. Emotions, beliefs, values, etc. have a place, but they should not overpower us. They should not be hijacking us. Many a time you and I get hijacked. Somebody other day asked me a very pertinent question. In spirituality, is there room for emotions at all? Bhavana. Adhyatmadalli bhavanegalige sthanavide was the nice question. I think even youngsters would relate to it. Because many youngsters mistake spirituality to be a great adventure of leaving all emotions behind and becoming like a stone. My uncle, my auntie, ajja, tata, they go to all this. Yakadru hoktaro, why do they go? They are, I think, becoming more and more Sthita Prajna. The word Sthita Prajna is, I think, more used in uncomplimentary sense than in complimentary sense. Years ago in Bangalore, I was part of an organization. See, I am good in speaking or writing. I am not good in organizing. But as part of the organization, I was given some organizing responsibility. In a meeting, I was supposed to arrange something. I noted it down, I forgot it. Because it's not my swadharma so much. I am not good in that. Finance, administration, it's not my cup of tea. So I just forgot actually. Or whenever I remember also, I said I'll do it tomorrow. Because it doesn't come naturally to me. But finally, when the day came when all that was to be ready, it was not ready. So another gentleman in our committee asked me, where is that? And they asked me, you are supposed to arrange it. I said, oh. Then I remember that secretary of the organization, one K. Krishnamurthy. He had great love and regard for me because he knows I did not do anything intentionally. But he said to me, ಏನು ಸ್ಥಿತಪ್ರಜ್ಞರ ಥರ ನಿಂತುಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೀರಾ ಎಲ್ಲಿದೆ ಅದು? You are standing like a Sthita Prajna. Where is that which you were supposed to bring? In the meeting we decided that you were to bring whatever, some for organizing sake. I apologized and I said, can I go and bring it now? Don't worry, we will do it. So the word Sthita Prajna is used by people to refer to somebody who is not sensitive, who is not responsible. Something going wrong, he just, oh really? Sutoita adu? Oh really? That got burnt? Oh, this got destroyed? So not really, no pain on his face, let us say. So youngsters also must be getting angry. Now, apart from all this humor, what is understanding? In understanding the thought, understanding how thought functions. Thought is making you unhappy. You must realize. And what in thought, what are the ingredients in thought that are making you unhappy? You need to see. The ingredients could be certain beliefs, certain values. You have tagged. Like I said in my own example, as I sat next to the present Vice Chancellor of BHU, my mind, said, I am sitting next to a Vice Chancellor, and at one time Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan Vice Chancellor here. And isn't it a nice thing? And so on. A tiny wave of exhilaration, a sense of rose in me. So both happiness and sadness on the psychological domain happen or come and go because of certain beliefs you hold. And if you were to notice those beliefs and see that those beliefs do not have an everlasting value, they don't have a sweeping relevance, these beliefs have a place of their own. Can we put them in their right place without stretching it, to irrelevant and unnecessary domains or areas? Then the who am I inquiry not only makes your I, the sense of I am good, I am bad, I am, that is self-description. It doesn't only make that just subside. Actually, it as though unwinds, opens, and like untying a knot. You have a knot, and it's one thing to just somehow avoid it, but you actually untie the knot. The thread, the rope is opened up now. So can you untie your mind? That is what the first bird gets to do. Because the first bird, tayoho anyaha. In Kannada and many other languages, anya means other. Sanskrit also, anya can mean other at times. Here itself, another line, anya means other. But Sanskrit, tayoho anyaha, when you say, it is not other, it is one of the two. Anyataraha is one of two. Anyatamaha is one of more than two, plural. Suppose you say, Dasha mitrani mama grihe agatani. 10 friends came to my house. Tesham anyatamaha. Tesham anyatamaha dugdham ichchati. One of them wants milk. All others go for coffee or tea. So anyatamaha has nothing to do with the other. It is one of the 10. So like that, tayoho anyaha, of these two birds seated upon the same tree, pippalam swadu atti. By force of context, though the word swadu generally means tasty, by force of context, what is meant is it eats fruits of different tastes. Again, by force of context, what it means is 9 out of 10 times the fruits are not delicious. More often than not, this bird is miserable. Where is that context? Context is based on other scriptures too, or here itself, In second shloka says, second mantra, shochati muhyamanaha. The first bird grieves. Shochati is the verbal form of shoka. It is sad time and again. And muhyamanaha, it gets deluded time and again. This first bird, which is full of grief, full of delusion, full of various kinds of misconceptions, etc., represents pretty much all of us. You and I are in the court of habits, and we are struggling with our habits. We want to give up our desire or anger, jealousy. Some of us have inferiority complex, some of us have superiority complex. Some of us, no matter how much Vedanta we have studied or heard, are unable to get over some weakness. Money, pleasure, these are the Kamini, Kanchana, Kirti, Hannu, what is that? Hennu, Honnu, Mannu. So these are the idiomatic expressions. Hennu, Honnu, Mannu. That is, women, gold, and land, literally. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, Kamini, Kanchana, pleasure and wealth. All said and done. So why is this happening? That is muhyamanaha, moha. When we attend discourses, or people like me, when we give discourses, the mind is very calm. Once we go out, you will be happy to know that not only you, I also, two people come to take me, and one is a small Maruti Zen or something, another is a big, I better not give a name, otherwise how do you know so much about cars, you will say. You think I will be able to look at both of them equally? Not easy. So, it's not easy, sir. It's not easy, madams, to, reading is easy, talking is easy, but to look at rich and poor equally, to look at good-looking people and people not well-dressed or having some kind of, strange appearance equally is not easy. To look at people speaking in a very refined and nice language and people, with either incorrect language or incorrect body language, etc., to look at all equally is not easy. Actually, in order that we may look at people of different kinds equally, to look at an 85-year-old woman and an 18-year-old young lady equally, what is the secret of being able to see them equally? In the spiritual context, it is not just an exercise of willpower. By a New Year resolution, 2016, I have made a decision. Whether a girl comes to me 18-year-old, young and sprightly and jumping, or 8-1, I am going to look at them equally. It won't last even one day. On January 1st itself, you will slip and fall. But then, how? Reading by itself doesn't help. But as we have been talking on it, day by day, moment by moment, we are watchful, we are more alert and tackle. And I have been laboring last few minutes to explain that this tackling is not a mere will. Will is necessary. We don't want to make fun of will. Sankalpa Shakti has its place. But in Jnana Yoga, all the more, along with Sankalpa Shakti, along with decision and resolve, etc., you need to look at why money or pleasure or this or that, how and why it affects you. Then you find that it is based on some false beliefs. I call it false because as you get deeper, you find that the basis for an attraction is questionable. The basis sometimes is, in psychology, I guess they call it transference. Let's say somebody in my childhood had taken great care of me. And today I meet a lady who looks like that. My unconscious mind will get drawn to this lady. I feel very comfortable with her. Why? I don't know why. Psychology. We don't want to go too much into psychology here, but I am just illustrating a concept. I feel very comfortable with this some lady, and I am wondering why. Quite possibly, as one example, there are some similarities of body language or looks or length of the nose or the type of the eyes or whatever. Some similarity with some lady, maybe sister or mother or some ayah at home. Sometimes at home there is somebody who is there for only 1 year or so, then they disappear. You never meet them again. But in that one crucial year of yours, when you were 8-year-old or 9-year-old, she was the one who took care. And after 30 years you meet somebody and you don't know, you don't remember, but you get drawn to her more easily. All these things happen. All these things happen. So we are in book reading, it doesn't take you much far. Therefore, some of you may think that I am going into a lot of digression. Let me come to the central point. The greatest power you have with you is not thought, is not intellectualism, is not ability to memorize or analyze or synthesize or, handle information. That is not the greatest power you have. All of them have some place. The greatest faculty you and I have is awareness. And how interesting, the Upanishadic literature finally says, pure awareness, pure light of consciousness is the highest truth. Prajnanam Brahma. The Mahavakya doesn't say Manaha Brahma. On the contrary, there are lines, Manaha becomes Amanaha. Mind goes. Manasaha Amani Bhavaha or Amanastam Gacchati, etc. Gaudapada Karikas have talked about it in very explicit terms. Maharshi Ramana in Upadesha Sara talks of Mano Nasha. Mind dies. What is meant is the psychological mind. The functional mind, of course, doesn't die, doesn't have to die. So, it should suffice to say at this point that this first bird representing you and all, the second bird representing to begin with God, but on a deeper level, it is our own divine potential. To use modern psychological language, the first bird is every one of us heavily conditioned. Heavily, conditioned by so many influences. Heavily in the grip of likes and dislikes. The first bird is you and me in the clutches of Ragadvesha. The second bird is again you and me. That is Advaita Vedanta. It is you and me only when we shed. There is an expression here, vidhuya. Tada vidwan punya pape vidhuya. Vidhuya, dhu dhunoti in Sanskrit means to shake something vigorously. Like if a carpet you find is a bit dirty, on a nice sunny day, 4 of you take that carpet outside and shake it, or take a stick and beat it. In Chandogya Upanishad there is a mention of a horse which has run a long distance and lot of dust has fallen upon its own body. After completing the journey, taking the master to wherever it had to take, the horse shakes its body and removes all the dust, flies away. By shaking its body, the horse gets cleaner. And the mantra in Chandogya Upanishad says, like that, in my meditation, I wish to drop. I wish to shake off. A friend of mine took it literally, and in his meditation, he used to shake physically. By physically shaking and shaking the head, you will get into some new delusion. It's only an analogy. shaking takes place when you see. When I see intensely that on the basis of language, I cannot take A to be better than B. A may talk better, but we are not considering, some news reading or something. Someone who has to read news, or if somebody's job is to communicate, you need language. We are, let's say, trying to associate somebody in some other capacity. Language or looks or color of skin or height or so many things. There are so many things. And alas, I should say alas, second time, hardly any one of us is free from certain prejudices. To shake those prejudices off, one has to see that this is silly. It is so silly for me to either judge somebody on the basis of color of skin, and it is more silly if I hold on to it. So to see with certain intensity makes you get free. That is vidhuya, punya pape vidhuya. The mantra says, the first bird shochati muhyamanaha, the second bird is abhichakashiti. But then somewhere, the first bird who has been happy and unhappy, sad and glad, alternating, looks at the second bird and wonders. This metaphor, therefore, taken literally, makes a clear distinction between Jiva and Ishvara. Therefore, no wonder these commentaries of duality, of qualified dualism, etc., have also gained great acceptance. But the non-dual interpretation, which looks a little roundabout in the beginning, has its own beauty, and then it is justified saying, these are extraordinary truths. And extraordinary truths are necessarily conveyed in very, very involved metaphoric language. Finally, as somebody here asked me other day, which one should we choose, Dvaita or Advaita or Vishishtadvaita? I answered, most of you were there. Find out what appeals to you and go by it. Respect others. In today's world, especially where you have a Christian as the right neighbor, a Jain fellow as the left neighbor, and next road there are two Buddhists, and another this side there are Muslims, and so on and so forth. You cannot afford to look down at anyone. Universal values have to be kept in mind. So within Sanatana Dharma also, we have these various interpretations. Now to go ahead with the Advaita interpretation, Jushtam yada pashyati anyam isham. Here anyam means the other. When the first bird sees the other bird, the second bird, isham, that is a ruler. Ish means to rule. Anisha is helplessness. Some of you who are reading Vishnu Sahasranama daily may say, but there is a name Anishaha in Vishnu Sahasranama. So does it mean Lord Vishnu also once in a while is helpless? Isha means master. Anisha means not master. That is a slave or subordinate. Here the word has come, Anishaya Shochati. The first bird out of not being the master, not being the Prabhu, the first bird being helpless, grieves, is sad. How come Vishnu Sahasranama has a name Anishaha? The explanation is Sanskrit has two kinds of compounds. Anisha can be interpreted in two ways. Na Ishaha, not master. That is one meaning. But another is Na Ishaha Vidyate Yasya, one who has no master. One who is not master, first meaning, one who has no master, Anish. The word Lokanatha in Sanskrit can mean two things. Lokasya Nataha, Lord of the whole world. Or Lokaha Nataha Yasya, the whole world is his boss. To everybody he says, Sir, ನೀವು ಹೇಗೆ ಹೇಳ್ತಿರೋ ಹಾಗೆ. ಮೇಡಮ್ ನೀವು ಹೇಳಿದ್, ನೀವು ಈಗ ಬೆಳಿಗ್ಗೆ ಅಂದರೆ ಬೆಳಿಗ್ಗೆ, ಇವಾಗ ರಾತ್ರಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದರೆ ಈಗ ರಾತ್ರಿ. ಇಫ್ ಯು ಸೇ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಡೇ, ಐ ಅಗ್ರಿ, ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಡೇ. ಇಫ್ ಯು ಸೇ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ನೈಟ್, ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ನೈಟ್. ಯಾಕೆ? ದಿ ಹೋಲ್ ಲೋಕ ಈಸ್ ಹಿಸ್ ಬಾಸ್. ಹಿ ಒಬೇಸ್ ಎವ್ರಿಬಡಿ. ದಟ್ ಮೀನ್ಸ್ ವೇ ಡೌನ್. ಲೋಕನಾಥ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಮೀನ್ ಲೋಕಸ್ಯ ನಾಥಃ ಆರ್ ಯಸ್ಯ lokah eva natah. Both are. So, that is a digression. Here, first bird is Anisha. Anishaya muhyati. And second bird is Isha, the master. And even as the first bird looks at the second bird, the Dvaita interpretation also would be very beautiful here. Even as we dwell more on Shiva, on Hari, on Ganesha, Dvaita in Christianity, as a Christian meditates more and more on Father in heaven or Jesus Christ, contemplates more and more, the ego dies a slow death. It is not watered. It's like a plant that is not watered, dies a natural death. Egoism goes away. So bhakti is a great ointment, it's a great remedy. Think more and more of the Lord of your heart. So the first bird looks at the second bird more and more, and then an inner transformation takes place. It's like a metamorphosis. As I began the talk today, all this to describe first, we say over a length of time there is a change. In Vedantic works, the example of Brahmara Kita is given. A wasp goes on looking at a flying insect. The wasp is in a cocoon. The wasp is growing bigger and bigger. The window opens in the cocoon, and the wasp looks at the bird, insect outside. And in a little dramatized version of it, the flying insect outside, in between, pecks and hits at this wasp inside. It feels the pain. Some gurus do that, I suppose. But whatever it is, pain or pleasure, slowly the wasp, which has been made to see the outer, the insect outside, the wasp also changes over to an insect, flying insect. That which was crawling becomes one that flies. That which had difficulty in going, moving, now takes wings and flies freely. In biology, metamorphosis is a wonderful phenomenon. Larva, right? Larva becoming a butterfly. It's just amazing. So, the jiva discovering Brahmatva. Jushtam yada pashyati anyamisham asya mahimanamiti vita shokaha. Vita shokaha. What is the relevance of Upanishads in modern times? The easiest way to appreciate Upanishads is time and again they are talking about ending of sorrow. Who doesn't want to end sorrow? Vita shokaha. And by context here, moha goes away, shoka goes away, and all other psychological negativities. You and I somehow have some negativity. Lust and greed, jealousy and depression, or moodiness, chanchalata, tempera, what do you call it? Temperament, temptations, we yield to temptations. Somebody is very temperamental, we say. Maybe the abstract noun is temperamentalism. So someone is too temperamental. In Kannada they say Ksanachitta, Ksanapitta. Ksanachitta, Ksanapitta. Just now he was so cheerful and said, "Ha ha, how nice to see you." And I felt encouraged. I sat. After 5 minutes says, "You have nothing else to do? Why are you eating my head today?" Ksanachitta, Ksanapitta. There are some people like that, very temperamental. Very difficult. So after 2 or 3 times when you see this, next time, 4th time when he is very kind, you are very careful. Appa, yesto thing irtare gottilla. We don't know how long he will remain peaceful like this. So far, so good. You keep, a little distance. So that is our psychology. All that goes away. In the metamorphosis we are talking about, in the dawn of true self-knowledge, these lectures are on self-knowledge, facets of self-knowledge in the Upanishads. The second bird represents the pure self. The first bird represents you and me, alas, caught in a false self. And let me make it once more clear. It is not about a change in factual perception. Factual, functional side of us doesn't change. If you loved music before awakening, you will love music later too. If you are expert in mathematics, you will continue to be an expert. And if you had a special taste for some kind of art, or why about art and music? Suppose you are very good in hospitality, you will continue to be. And somebody is a little introvert, given to it, doesn't talk much. That person may continue to talk less. It's not about talking more or talking less, being very hospitable or being a little reserved. These are all, personality traits. But please note, when you are hospitable, receiving everybody with lot of happiness, suppose you always entertained some selfish motives. ಇವರೆಲ್ಲ ಬೇಕಪ್ಪ ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ನೋಡಿಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ ನಾಳೆ ತುಂಬ ಲಾಭ ಇದೆ. There is a motive. That goes away in self-knowledge. You are always very friendly, very hospitable. People came to your house, you would go out of your way to make them happy. But in lack of self-knowledge, there were expectations, there were some kind of personal desires. Upon the awakening, you continue to be as hospitable as ever. Skills, emotional intelligence, regular IQ, intelligence quotient. You and I have so many gifts. Our gifts and our shortcomings, pretty much all of them continue. Why not? But these gifts and shortcomings earlier carried a flavor of personal insecurity or sometimes superiority complex. Suppose I have better English knowledge than my sister, then I always felt, how many times I told her, and this world is not for people with poor English, I tell you, today's world especially. So like that I suppose had some notions. That was a pure confusion. Upon awakening, I continue to speak better English. My sister continues to make errors. Like the joke goes, when she was asked in the school, what is the passive voice of? I made a mistake. She got up and said, I was made by mistake. That was my sister's English. Whereas I won prizes in debates and essays and it had gone into my head. As though knowing better English makes you, everything. Later on, life gave me many blows, and many people were like, I saw that many people like my sister much more. I first thought they respect me. Then I came to know that they fear me. They are afraid. One day I overheard, ಅವ್ರ ಹತ್ರ ಹೋಗ್ಬೇಡ್ರಪ್ಪ, ಇಂಗ್ಲೀಷಲ್ಲಿ ಬೈತಾರೆ. He will scold us in such Victorian English, it's difficult to bear. ಅವ್ರ ತಂಗಿ ಎಷ್ಟೋ ಬೆಟರ್, ಬೈಯೋದಿಲ್ಲ, ಆಮೇಲೆ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ನೋಡ್ಕೋತಾರೆ. Then I saw that, So there is a awakening. Of course, we are talking of a quantum leap. The final blow, though I said final, there's a technicality about it. Basically, as I began the talk, it's not really on the axis of time. Therefore, we have been using the word awakening. Yada pasyaha pasyate rukma varnam. God on one level, God and man, Jiva and Ishvara. The Ishvara is radiant. Rukma means gold, of gold complexion. Rukma Varna. Kartaram, he is the creator. He is the Prabhu, Isha. Brahma Yonim. He is Brahma and he is Yoni, is the source of everything. Brahmacha, Yonischa. And then the seeker, the Jiva, goes through a change. Punya pape vidhuya niranjanaha. All the psychological errors. On some ground you think high of yourself, on some other ground you think low of yourself. Unnecessary. Accept yourself as you are when it comes to skills and preferences, likes, dislikes, etc. That doesn't mean that you should not learn new languages, etc., or some new skill. Don't say that. That's what I am not a computer literate. Everybody is telling me learn some computer, learn some all this email, etc. Swamiji, thank you. You said be yourself. It is on a different level. I am not saying. Those decisions you take not out of uncertainty or insecurity. When you have spiritual wisdom, you learn something new or you say I don't need to learn, both out of a certain inner security. Today we do many things out of fear. We say, I better learn, otherwise, I know one dentist in USA, our Indian lady. She said, I'm so stressed, what shall I do? I said, why don't you are not much interested in money, etc. Why don't you cut down your work? Be a part-time. I can never forget the idiom she used, and I added it to my vocabulary later. She said, Swamiji, you don't know how it is here in America. Either we have to work full steam, and if we cut down part-time, we slow down, we are thrown off the wagon. We are thrown off the wagon. So I have to update, I have to have the latest equipment for dentistry. Her context was dentistry. I have to advertise, I have to, otherwise. This time recently when I there, one other lady, white lady, also had the same conflict about yoga. She is a yoga teacher. She said, I am teaching yoga, I love yoga, but people are asking me, you should be on Facebook, you should bring out so many things. I am not so tech savvy. Then I, typical of mine, I said, it's okay, you do whatever level you do. No, it's not so easy. Then I asked her, are you afraid you will be thrown off the wagon? Exactly! Unless I become sophisticated, I market myself, I present myself here, I am everywhere, everybody comes to know me. Unless I do that, I will be thrown off the wagon. Therefore, I am attending a course, I am taking... See, she goes for certain new things out of certain fear. Whereas in this awakening, nothing prevents you for going for new things. Nothing puts so much pressure on you also. You do whatever you do with peace in heart, with a certain intuitive sense of security. I am okay. Somebody tries to scare you, you say, don't scare me. You tell me what you want me to do. And let me see whether I can do. I will do it. Don't scare me that you will be nowhere, people will trample on you. If you see Indian newspapers, all these drastic expressions you get on the sports page. Australia turns India to pulp. That is the title. Long back in my high school days, I studied in Kannada medium. I took it literally. What happened? All of them were turned into pulp. Then I said, Australia won by a large margin, that's all. When they won by a number of runs or so many wickets in hand and so on. Sports pages use such expressions. Australia turned India to pulp. This world is like that, it scares. But then, Niranjanaha means you are so clear, so pure, so free of these false notions. The Advaita teachers dance in joy at the last line. Paramam samyam upaiti. Sama means same, samya is sameness. The first word attains sameness. As though the word samya is not enough, paramam samyam upaiti. So the Shankara students say, see. 7 lines had a strong flavor of Dvaita. Kartaram, Isham, Jushtam, Anyam, and all those big words. And I am Anisha, I am helpless, I am... So strong flavor of Dvaita. But towards the end, one expression. Paramam Samyam Upaiti. Absolute oneness. No difference at all. Aham Brahmasmi, Tattvamasi, all that go well with. Therefore, by and large, Gita or Upanishads, they have, all these flavors. Whatever flavor, appeals to you, take it. In any of these schools of thought, if you are sincere, you go to such dizzy heights. Don't waste time in thinking about which school is the right one. Who is right, who is wrong, who is up, who is down. That's a waste of energy. Find out where your heart resonates. If any of you here who might have attended 1,000 discourses on Vedanta, Advaita, etc., feel somehow, I love bhakti, please stop attending all these lectures. When I come next time, just wish me well on the road, don't come in. Instead of wasting your time in this, all this lecture, go home, take Japamala or sing a song, take some Kanakadasa, Purandara, Gita, enjoy. Because what you must do is be happy, make others happy in a harmonious way. Right? So some achieve it by this way, some achieve it that way. The way should not be a big issue. Samyam upaiti. Finally, all of us, by sincere self-application to spirituality, rise to heights of human excellence. It is all about human excellence, being loving and lovable persons no matter what, rich or poor, famous or otherwise, with lot of problems around or with not much problem, either way. Spirituality is to have a certain mind alert and sensitive, connecting well, not a dumb and dull mind. That's not true spirituality. You are alert. You understand what is happening and you are peaceful, loving. That is self-knowledge in the Upanishads. Please feel free to comment or make a question or ask a question or two. Yes, Satya.
You refer to a very interesting difference right in the beginning
of
biological need and psychological.
Correct.
And later, of course, you said to stay in the boat or to stay in the wagon. Now, the problem many of us face really is that what is biological at the beginning or what is psychological at the beginning?
Correct.
What is a need or what's a want in the beginning becomes a need as we keep going.
Okay.
Right? So, in other words, it becomes difficult to distinguish between biological and psychological need. And so what happens is our happiness, our state of mind, peace of mind, our happiness is determined by our relatively staying in the boat or going up. We can't tolerate coming down.
Yeah.
So in other words, if you look at today's tech world,
Correct.
somebody said you become obsolete every 7 or 8 years.
Right.
So you have to keep reinventing yourself
True.
to stay competitive and marketable.
True.
And that unfortunately is a necessity of the real world.
Yeah.
So the problem is, it's not so easy to really distinguish between biological needs and psychological needs.
Right.
And that's really the
So, yeah, I understand. I fully understand. But I think as is the case, his question in summary is the dividing line between biological needs and psychological needs is many times not clear. It's a very thin line. So, to put it in another language, there is a black area, there is a white area, there is a grey area. I think you and I can work on what is clear. There are certain things which our heart says, I really don't need. Just because Tom, Dick and Harry is going for it, I don't need. So we save our energy we optimize our energy by striking on that. It's not only in needs, even in certain functions. Recently, I just washed my hands off some administrative work which I was trying to do in Varanasi, because it became extremely clear to me that that is not my work. So what I said was, this is very clearly not my cup of tea. So when I recently went there, they were asking me to come back. I said, no, that's not my Swadharma. So in the case of Swadharma and Paradharma also same thing. There are certain things which are clear, some are grey areas. Some certain things look like your duty, whether I am able to do or not, but it's my duty. If your conscience says this is my duty, then don't run away from it. But your conscience says this is neither my duty nor is there any necessity. There are certain things. In fact, some of us actually don't need name and fame at all. But the staying in wagon. Now, the dentist in Los Angeles, when she said, I'm sure her friends put pressure on her, not just on earning. It was fame and name, it was being accepted somewhere, it was being talked well of somewhere. And this lady, for all I know, may not care for those things. But she certainly doesn't want her profession to sink. Because she has some responsibility. She wants to earn fairly enough until her 2 boys complete their college or something. There were certain pressures on her that time. So we need to examine what are those pressures upon us. So start on what is clear, and otherwise, if you have doubt, no problem. In Advaita Vedanta never asks us to quit literally. You can stay on. So be true to yourself. Somebody says this is psychological need. Say to them openly, you may think it's psychological. For me, this is biological need now. You may think it is a fancy, but for me it is reality. Tomorrow when it changes its roof, I'll see. But today, this kind of car. Somebody in San Francisco Bay Area, bought a Lexus for his daughter when she went to college. Some people made fun of her. For such young lady, why do you spend so much? But he said, I also asked him. He said, no, I am not. I didn't buy a Lexus to boost her prestige or something. Suppose some other car hits her, I don't want her to suffer much. This is stronger. That was his. I like that, openness. It has nothing to do with show off. It is for her security. I don't want my daughter to, suffer much. The small cars, inexpensive cars which students take sometimes, economical, but in accidents they are likely to suffer a lot. So you and I need to be very straightforward in this. Yes, sir.
Sir, after listening to your lectures today, we get a feeling that the objective of spiritual science is to avoid probably get rid of the psychological disorders.
Correct.
Suppose if somebody is having any limitations, etc.
Yeah.
But I think somehow we felt that going through spiritual science, what we thought was it will improve our intellect and it will give us divine powers.
Okay.
That was our impression. But today, after listening
to
that, but mostly, I think in practical world, what it does is only it removes our psychological limitations.
Yeah.
I think whether it is true, whether it will not give us divine powers.
My position is,
for example, Christianity and Muslim, in the Islamic culture, how do they view this self-knowledge? Whether it is same as we view, or whether they are having a different notion of self-knowledge.
So when it comes to, first question my position is primarily it is to remove psychological disorders and give us peace and sense of love and lovability. Secondarily, divine powers, sharper intellect, etc. will come. Those are siddhis in a way. Those come to us. They are secondary. Coming to these Christians and Muslims, in any religion, including Hinduism, there are very orthodox, almost fanatical people. So orthodox and fanatical Christians, Muslims, etc. would just laugh at this self-knowledge, etc. They say this is another big confusion. A lot of Hindus also say it. But there are a lot of liberal Muslims, Christians. They enjoy this. In fact, they study also. They try to integrate this with their Bible, Quran, or Sufism, etc. goes very well with Vedanta. And in Christianity, a whole lot of Christians, enjoy this. And they even say Jesus Christ said this. Jesus Christ in his own way. There is a statement in the Bible, my Father and I are one. And that is interpreted in Advaitic way. Whereas the Orthodox Church would say, my Father and I are one, only means my Father and I are one in our mission. We have the same job before us. They interpret like that. A lot of Hindus, don't like this certain philosophy. They believe in worship. They believe in God giving them rewards. That is Sakama Bhakti. Some people go every year to Ayyappa or Tirupati and so on. I mean, there also there are Nishkama Bhaktas. I don't say all going there are. But majority, that is popular religion. Popular religion is God should take care of our family. God should ensure that my son, my daughter, they complete education well, get good life mates. There's a long list. God should take care of it, which is fine. Okay, over there.
Two aspects of the same truth.
Aurobindo.
Two aspects of the same truth.
Interesting. Very good. Oh yeah, why not? Same truth of two aspects, Dvaita and Advaita. I like that.
The question I have now mostly no relevance to what you have
That's fine.
discussed today. A person has to live a life, his or her life, is his own or her own choice. But my elders have told me, or seniors have told me, that in the present day context,
Yeah.
it is better for oneself to come out of the filial relationships he or she has to lead a better life.
Oh.
Is it true?
Come out of what relationships?
Filial relationships.
What does filial actually mean? I've heard.
Too much of attachment to oneself.
Oh.
Yes.
So your seniors have told you to come out of your attachments.
Because they have experienced that in the present day context.
I see. I think it is so always. But I would say that coming out of attachments doesn't mean to disown. What it meant is to keep right distances. In relationships, right distances are very necessary. If you don't keep right distances, one Swami Chinmayananda was advising a young couple, and he said, be together, but let there be a distance between two. And if I remember right, he quoted from Omar Khayyam or maybe Khalil Gibran. One of them say, don't drink from each other's cup, but fill each other's cup. You drink from your own cup, let her drink from her own cup. But in between you may fill her cup and she may fill your cup. See the poetic language. Let there be some distance. Some distance everywhere is most helpful. Otherwise, greatest heartburns are caused because we got too close and became so independent, so dependent on each other. I think it's not in modern times only. This is a truth from time immemorial. Last question. Yes. Oh, welcome. Ashok Narendra.
Sir, these Vedanta teachings help us to become a better person.
Yeah.
By keeping our sorrow and other things and seeing it dispassionately.
Correct.
But my feeling is, every individual, as he goes on aging, the process becomes evident and he is a better person as age determines. So this is a universal truth as far as I can understand. What I want to know is how the Western world, Western philosophy treats these teachings of Vedanta, whether they have got a similar or parallel system of teaching this. Whether there is any similarity, commonality or common ground.
Yeah, see, in today's world, enough of exchange between East and West has taken place. There are a good percentage of Western thinkers who appreciate the Eastern ways. More than Vedanta, Buddhism is growing so much in the West now. Lot of Buddhist, training centers, Buddhist schools. But there are lots of critics also. There are lots of people who continue to look at Eastern philosophy as pessimistic, as not practical, and so on. There was this Joseph Campbell who was so much drawn to the East. He was deeply touched by Upanishads. And recently I was reviewing a little of his literature. In what we call Sat Chit Ananda, Joseph Campbell, he was a professor of mythology in New York. He liked this Ananda so much that every one of us is of the nature of Ananda. And if you Google up, you will find there are hundreds of wonderful statements by Joseph Campbell, who is no more now. And of all those, more than several hundreds of really powerful statements he made, he was gifted with a communication ability. The most common, most well-known and most famous statement of Joseph Campbell is follow your bliss. Be yourself, follow your bliss. Don't be under the pressure of the society. Do what you like to do, etc. And many of us Vedanta students, teachers also liked him. And I, till recently, when I did a little research for our magazine Inner Flame, where we have published an article by him, I didn't know that a lot of Westerners were very, very negative towards him. The, Wikipedia page on Joseph Campbell gives a lot of material on how he was so well received, popular, famous. Then criticism. Wikipedia gives a criticism section also. One after another, eminent academicians and others have come down heavily on him. One of them, just to give an example, is some professor in the US said in a scathing attack, this Joseph Campbell has gone off his head. This follow your bliss, do what pleases you, go by your heart's calling, etc. is nothing but narcissism. Narcissism, would it be proper to say it is self-love? One is so fond of oneself. I am right. I am okay. So narcissism is a very uncomplimentary word. He is basically promoting narcissism, self-love. That means it is highly anti-Christian, it is anti-God. We have to sacrifice ourselves for God's. We have to go by God's word. Here is a man who is turning everybody towards self-love. Do what you like, leave the Bible aside. He is dangerous to our country, etc. They have written. So you asked a very nice question, this West. Sir, West is divided now. A certain section adores the Eastern thinking, certain section strongly criticizes. Certain missionaries, certain evangelists, etc., they continue to say the students of Veda are already, they have seats reserved in hell for them. They say that, because unless you submit to Christ, you are gone. They vehemently, they say that. Okay.